The sun and moon that govern all life in Middle-earth are not cosmic constants. They are the ghosts of a murdered paradise. Their death was a deicide, an assassination of the divine, so profound it makes the destruction of the One Ring seem like extinguishing a single candle. This is the story of a light so pure that its memory alone would inspire the greatest deeds and most terrible crimes of the First Age. This is the Chronicle of Telperion and Laurelin, the Two Trees of Valinor. Before time was measured, there was the void. Out of this void, the Supreme Being, Eru Ilúvatar, brought forth the Ainur, the Holy Ones. Through their great music, a vision of a world was shown, a seed of what could be. This world, Arda, was then given substance, and those Ainur who wished to descend into it to shape and govern it became known as the Valar, the powers of the world. Their first great labor was to bring order to the tumult of creation. To illuminate the primeval world, the Vala Auyule, the smith, forged two colossal lamps. The first, Iluin, was set upon a mighty pillar in the north of Middle-earth, and its light was a cool, silver flame. The second, Ormal, was placed in the south, and its light was the warm glow of gold. In the age of their blended light, life first stirred upon the earth. Great forests grew, and strange and mighty creatures walked the land in a perpetual, dreamlike twilight. This was the spring of Arda, a time of perfection. But one of the Valar, Melkor, the most powerful of them all, was consumed by a lust for power and a jealousy of his brethren's creations. He despised the order they had brought, and most of all, he hated their light. From his secret fortress of Utumno in the far north, he gathered his strength. Then, in a sudden and terrible assault, he cast down the two great pillars. The fall of the lamps was an apocalypse. Seas rose in monumental waves, continents were broken and reshaped, and the fire within the lamps was spilled across the world, burning the perfect symmetry of the spring of Arda to ruin. The world was plunged into a suffocating darkness. The Valar retreated from the broken lands of Middle-earth. They crossed the Great Sea to a new continent in the uttermost west, which they named Aman, the Blessed Realm. There, they raised an impassable wall of mountains, the Pelori, to defend their new home. Behind this divine shield, they established their kingdom of Valinor, a land of eternal peace, untainted by the shadow of Melkor. Yet, it was a land without light. But how can life flourish without light? The Valar gathered upon the green mound of Azellohar, and there Yavanna, the giver of fruits, whose thought is of all things that grow, knelt and sang a song of immense power. Nienna, the lady of pity and mourning, watered the mound with her tears. The other Valar sat in silence, listening, as two slender shoots emerged from the earth. Under their song, the shoots grew into two magnificent trees, the most beautiful creations ever to grace the world. The elder of the two was named Telperion. His leaves were dark green above and shining silver beneath, and from his boughs dripped a dew of pure silver light. The second was Laurelin, the golden tree. Her leaves were a tender green, trimmed with gold, and her flowers bloomed in clusters of yellow flame, scattering a golden rain upon the ground. Their light was not like the fire of the sun, but a living, breathing radiance that waxed and waned in a great, slow cycle. For 7 hours one would shine, and then it would fade as the other grew to its full brilliance. Twice each day, there was a tender hour when their lights mingled, a soft dawn of silver and gold. This rhythm became the first measurement of time in the history of the world. The trees were not mere lamps. They were alive, the ultimate expression of life and holiness in Arda. Their light was the light of bliss, and in it, Valinor prospered in ageless perfection. But this perfect, self-contained light, hidden from the rest of the world, would not just inspire creation. It would breed an envy so deep and a greed so absolute that it would summon a darkness from beyond the very walls of the world. What ancient horror was drawn to this perfect light? While Valinor bathed in this sacred glow, Middle-earth remained under the faint starlight. And it was there, by the shores of the lake Cuiviénen, that the elves, the firstborn of the children of Ilúvatar, awoke. The Valar, learning of their existence, made war upon Melkor to protect them, capturing him and imprisoning him for 3 long ages. Many of the elves were then invited to make the long journey to Valinor to live beside the powers. Those who came, the Eldar, were forever changed by the light of the two trees. It passed into their eyes and into their very being, making them fairer, wiser, and more powerful than any who would come after. Among them was one of the Noldor, the Deep Elves, whose skill in craft was unparalleled. His name was Fëanor. He was the most brilliant and gifted of all the elves, yet also the proudest and most hot-tempered. His spirit burned like a white-hot flame. Gazing upon the light of Telperion and Laurelin, he was possessed by a singular obsession: to capture that light, to preserve it in a form that could never be diminished. For years he labored in secret, pouring all of his genius, his power, and his very essence into his work. The result was his magnum opus, the three Silmarils. They appeared as great jewels of crystal, but they were not mere stones. Within them, Fëanor had managed to imprison the blended living light of the two trees. They shone of their own accord, with a light more beautiful than any other gem, for they were alive. They were holy. Varda, the queen of the stars, hallowed them so that no mortal flesh, nor any unclean hand, could touch them without being burned. The creation of the Silmarils was the pinnacle of elven artistry, a miracle born of devotion. Yet, in capturing a piece of the divine, had Fëanor also created the perfect catalyst for its destruction? For light this pure casts the darkest of shadows. Melkor's 3 ages of imprisonment came to an end. He feigned repentance, bowing before the throne of the Valar and offering his service. Manwë, the king of the Valar, in his mercy believed him reformed, and granted him his freedom within Valinor. But Melkor's heart was unchanged. He saw the bliss of the elves and the beauty of the trees, and his hatred festered into a bottomless envy. He coveted the Silmarils with a burning desire, seeing in them the light he had always despised, and now desperately wished to possess. He began to walk among the Noldor, whispering subtle lies. He spoke of men, the second-born, who were prophesied to one day inherit Middle-earth, suggesting the Valar had brought the elves to Valinor to cage them and allow this lesser race to supplant them. He sowed fear and mistrust, turning brother against brother, and he targeted Fëanor's pride most of all, hinting that his own kin sought to steal the Silmarils from him. Fëanor, possessive and proud, grew paranoid, locking his prized jewels away and guarding them jealously, even from the Valar. His malice now laid bare, Melkor fled Valinor, but he did not go far. He traveled south to Avathar, a dark and forgotten land on the shores of Aman, shadowed by the Pelori Mountains. There dwelt a creature of primordial horror, an ancient spirit of darkness and hunger. She had taken the form of a colossal spider, but she was no mere beast. She was Ungoliant, the great spider, a void that took shape, a being whose only desire was to consume and unmake. She craved light, not to enjoy it, but to devour it, to feed her eternal emptiness. Melkor came before her and made a pact. He promised her insatiable hunger, a feast unlike any other, a meal of light so pure and powerful it would sate her for a time. In return, she would aid him in his vengeance against the Valar. Ungoliant agreed, and together they plotted their attack. She wove a cloak of unlight around them both, a void of shadow so profound that it did not merely block light, it consumed it. It was a tangible negation of sight and being. They crept back towards the heart of Valinor, unseen and unheard, a moving patch of utter night in a land of eternal day. They timed their assault perfectly, for it was a time of high festival, when all the inhabitants of Valinor were gathered at the halls of Manwë upon Taniquetil, the highest peak of the Pelori, to offer thanks and praise. The city of Tirion was empty. The green mound of Izelohar was silent and unguarded, and upon it, Telperion was shining in his full silver glory, while Laurelin's golden light lay dormant, awaiting its hour. Out of the darkness they came, Melkor, the Dark Lord, now vast and terrible, and Ungoliant, a nightmare of devouring shadow. They stood at the base of the silver tree, and in the heart of paradise, the first Dark Lord raised his great black spear, not merely to wound, but to murder God's own light at its very source. He drove the spear deep into Telperion's side, again and again, wounding it grievously. A dark sap, like black blood, spilled onto the ground. Ungoliant, the great void, then latched her monstrous form onto the trees. She thrust her black beak into their wounds and drained them of their life and light. She drank, and as she did, she swelled to a size so vast and hideous that even Melkor began to be afraid. The light of Telperion was gone. Then she turned to Laurelin the Golden. Melkor pierced it as he had its sibling, and Ungoliant drained it dry. The golden light was extinguished, but her thirst was not quenched. She went back to the wells of Varda, the pools that collected the trees, dewed, and drank them dry until all that was left was dust. And as she drank, she spewed forth fumes of utter blackness, a reeking vapor of anti-light that suffocated all life and smothered all sight. The darkness of Valinor had begun. It was not a mere absence of light, like the gentle dark of night. It was a tangible, oppressive presence, a crushing weight of despair that smothered the spirit. The music of the Valar fell silent. The joyous songs of the elves turned to weeping. But in that moment of absolute despair, something profound had changed. Before, the light of the trees was a gift to all. Now, it was gone. Gone. Except for in one place, the Silmarils. Suddenly, Fëanor's creations were no longer just the greatest craft ever made. They were the last memory of a world that no longer existed. They were the sole vessel of a power that could never be remade. In the darkness at the foot of the dead trees, Melkor laughed. He had won. He had destroyed the Valar's greatest creation and plunged their perfect world into shadow. But his accomplice was not celebrating. Ungoliant, now swollen to a terrifying size, her hunger only amplified by the divine meal, turned her countless pale eyes upon him. The feast was over, but the bargain was not complete. For what does a being of pure, eternal hunger truly desire? Not just a meal, but the source of all meals. What happens when one void tries to double-cross another? She wove her webs of shadow around him, demanding her payment. "You have fed me," her thought echoed in the darkness. "But you hold back the true prize. Give them to me. I must have them." She was not speaking of more light from the trees. She was speaking of the jewels. Melkor had promised her the Silmarils. He refused. He had not come this far, murdered the very light of creation, to hand over its last remnant to a mindless beast. The Silmarils were his. He desired them for himself, to be Lord of Light as well as Shadow. Terrified and overpowered, Melkor let out a cry of such immense and piercing terror that it echoed through the mountains. It was a sound of pure agony and rage, a sound that would forever be imprinted on the stone of the world. And far away, in the north, it was heard. The Balrogs, his fiery servants who had hidden themselves in the depths of the earth for ages, were roused by their master's call. They came like a storm of fire and shadow, their whips of flame tearing through Ungoliant's webs of darkness, and drove the great spider away in fear. Freed, Melkor did not linger. With his Balrogs, he fled the heart of Valinor, a moving storm of darkness and fire. But they did not head straight for the coast. They made one last stop. They came to the fortress of Formenos, where Fëanor had built his treasury, and where his father, Finwë, the High King of the Noldor, kept watch. At the gates stood Finwë alone, and he would not yield. There, in the now permanent twilight, Melkor slew him. The first blood was spilled in the Blessed Realm. With Finwë dead, Melkor broke down the doors, smashed the treasury, and seized the 3 Silmarils. Though they were hallowed, his malice was so great that he held them, and they burned his hands, scarring him with a black, unhealing fire for the rest of time. But he did not care. He had his prize. The news spread on the dark winds. The trees were dead. Finwë, the king, was murdered. The Silmarils were gone. When Fëanor arrived at Formenos and saw his father's body lying on the cold stone before his ransacked home, his grief was a thing of terror. It was a fire that consumed all reason, all light within him. The love for his father and the obsessive love for his creations curdled into a singular, all-consuming rage. He stood before the assembled Valar and the grieving Noldor, and his voice was like a sword. He cursed Melkor, and he gave him a new name, a name whispered in hatred: Morgoth, the Black Foe, the dark tyrant of the world. But he did not stop there. He also cursed the Valar, blaming their weakness for what had happened. He accused them of caging his people and leaving them defenseless. And in his madness and grief, he swore an oath so terrible and binding that it would echo through all the ages of the world and bring about ruin beyond imagining. He raised his sword, and his 7 sons came to stand with him, their faces grim in the starlight. Before the host of the Noldor, Fëanor swore his oath, and it was the most dreadful in the history of the world. He called upon Manwë, Varda, and the sacred mountain of Taniquetil as witness. He even called upon the name of Ilúvatar himself, swearing to pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world any Vala, demon, elf, or man as yet unborn, who should hold or take or keep a Silmaril from their possession. Death we will deal him ere day's ending. Woe unto world's end. Our word hear thou, Eru Allfather. To the everlasting darkness doom us if our deed faileth. On the holy mountain hear and witness, and our vow remember. Manwë and Varda, his sons, cried out beside him, their voices joining his, and their 8 swords rang as they were drawn. The very air seemed to grow thin and cold, and a shadow of dread fell upon all who heard them. His words of fire and passion swayed the hearts of the Noldor. He spoke of the vast, unclaimed lands of Middle-earth, of founding new kingdoms, free from the watchfulness of the Valar. He painted their life in Valinor not as a gift, but as a gilded cage. A great madness seized the elves. and a burning desire for the open lands, and a lust for war was kindled within them. Though his half-brother Fingolfin counseled caution, the tide was too strong. The Noldor would depart, but as the great host made ready to leave the city of Tirion, a dark figure appeared on the pass of the mountains. It was Mandos, the doomsman, and he spoke the prophecy of the north, the doom of the Noldor. His voice was grave and cold as the stone of the mountains. "Tears unnumbered ye shall shed," he declared, "and for that you have sworn in vain and shall not fulfill. Your oath shall betray you, and ever snatch from you the treasures that you have sworn to pursue. For you have spilled the blood of your kindred unrighteously," the voice of Mandos echoed, "and have stained the land of Aman. For blood you shall render blood, and beyond Aman you shall dwell in death's shadow. A new star shall rise, but for you it shall be a light of terror. And of Valinor you shall be utterly bereft, and no prayer will ever reach our ears upon your behalf. Your houses shall have no help from the Valar in this quest. From this hour, and in all your deeds you shall be counted as the children of despair." But Fëanor laughed, his heart hardened by grief and pride. "We have sworn an oath, and it is not lightly sworn," he cried. "We will go. Our deeds shall be the matter of song until the last days of Arda." He turned his back on the prophet of doom and led his people forward into the long darkness of the north. The light of the trees was extinguished. The grace of Valinor was forsaken. The Silmarils, jewels of light and bliss, had become stones of doom, setting in motion a war that would drown a continent and scar the world forever. The age of bliss is over. The age of war has begun. We have witnessed the creation of the world, the music of the Ainur, the glory of the two trees, and now their tragic end. But this is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the great tales. The flight of the Noldor, the building of the hidden kingdoms, the epic battles against Morgoth, and the tragic fate of the heroes who dared to challenge the darkness. The grandest and most sorrowful sagas are yet to be told. To follow the Noldor on their perilous journey to Middle-earth and witness the wars of Beleriand, make sure you subscribe to the _Silmarillion_Chronicles. The legend